Bom, pessoal, agora a gente vai começar os cases, né? Então, oferecidos pelo Cyber Financial. A gente vai ter um case agora falando da Bell Canada sobre Strategy Agency Management to Optimizing Recovery and Customer Experience. Ok? Para isso eu vou chamar o James O'Donnell, Senior Consultant da Equifax UK. Ok? James, por favor. Palmas.
Thank you. All right, so in the interest of time, I'll try to keep this quick since we're already running quite a bit over. But let me start by apologizing for not being able to speak Portuguese. I have been working in a lot of nations around the world. South America has not been one of those regions. And I think the only thing I can bring to the table to make up for not being able to speak Portuguese is a bit of an international perspective today. So what I'm here to talk about is a case study that we have here on a major telecommunications company that we deployed Cyber Financial with in Canada. Before I start with the case study and why they approached us and how we helped them improve their collections, what I would like to start with is a bit of background about who we are. Many of you may have encountered Cyber Financial already, but you may not know the back history of Equifax and our involvement in the debt collection industry. If I am speaking a bit too fast, I apologize. So in 2013, Equifax purchased two organizations. Infinix, which has the technology. Infinix has a capable debt collection platform for managing the full life cycle of a debt from delinquency all the way through to debt sale. And TDX, the other company that was purchased in the UK, is an organization that specializes in advisory and consulting services. They do a lot of analytics with the data that Equifax has to help improve the collections with tools like Cyber Financial. So it was a very complementary merging of the two organizations. And the first use case we had of tying TDX's advisory services to Cyber Financial was in Canada with Bell Canada. So why did Bell, Canada's largest telco, approach us to help them with their collections? Essentially, they had three major problems. They had a lack of investment and business expertise. Essentially, it wasn't really their business to collect. Their business is to be a telecommunications company. Their business is to service their customers as a telco. And they just weren't investing in the collection side of things. This led to about 12 years of ineffective collections. They hadn't changed their strategy for a long time. They hadn't added new data for a long time, and their systems were outdated. The next problem they had was in control of the life cycle of the debt, and that's really where Cyber came in. Cyber was able to add a new element to adding decisioning to their collections process, to referring debt out to debt collection agencies more effectively and faster in an automated way. Essentially, their problem in a nutshell was they had a pretty effective first-party collections process. They had some strong fixed collection paths in place, but they had no idea what was happening when they sent the debt out to their third-party collections. Their third problem, and this was one we were able to help with very quickly, was visibility of what was happening to their debt. Visibility in the sense of understanding how their debt portfolio was performing when it was sent to collection agencies, and visibility in terms of then being able to respond to what's happening in their portfolio and control the performance on an ongoing basis. So how did we then help Bell? How did we introduce a new collections process with Cyber Financial? Well, the first thing we did was add visibility. So The cyber financial system has a very capable visualization tool that helps you understand the data. And then on top of that, we introduced monthly and weekly reviews of what was happening in their portfolio and added commentary to really dive into the detail, understand what was happening, and add value. I've just got a few examples here. In the bottom right-hand corner, I want to highlight this one. This is a seasonal decomposition. Effectively, what happens is we take the portfolio performance for the last 10 years, and we try to understand what's going to happen to the performance of the portfolio over the course of the year, each month, in a generally guaranteed manner. Essentially, we ran the 10 years worth of data through a Loess regression, and that regression took out the trend, the growth performance, it took out the remainder performance, and it left us with a picture of which months were strongest in terms of performance and which ones were weakest. And it's not just about the visualization that Saiba was able to provide, it's what we then did with that information. We were then able to adjust the performance metrics and the performance processes in each month. So essentially in January, we identified the strongest month. Every year, January was the highest performing month without fail. So in January, we paid the agencies to add additional resource to increase collections during that period. We also sent the debt out to more agencies just to add additional capability during that period. In the weaker months, we can see in the middle of the year, June is guaranteed to be the weakest month of the year, we added new targeted campaigns. We targeted those that were still likely to pay regardless of the macroeconomic performance. That's just a picture of how we use the insights from the visualization tool in Saiba to then respond and change the collections process. On the other side here, we have a view of debt age. And this one is interesting because it helped us respond quickly to adjust a process. What we see is a monthly view of the average age of the debt, and that average age tells us the quality of that debt, the likelihood of collecting. The younger the debt, the more likely you are to be able to collect upon it. Now, what we see in the April period here is a change in the overall age. You can see the mean of that age of debt increasing significantly, and that changes the ability to collect upon it. So, using the cyber financial tool, we were able to respond quickly. We were able to add another agency that had a specialist capability in aged debt, and we were able to improve our collections on what would have otherwise been a very low performing period of debt collection. So beyond adding visibility to the data, to the collection portfolio, we wanted to add additional data. Saiba was able to absorb a significant amount of data from Equifax, the credit bureau, and then we were able to adjust for that, and just going to speed through this bit here, we were able to then add that into a model. That model made decisions upon the additional data that we were able to collect. For instance, the model was able to identify where affordability, where additional income that we had modeled in Equifax indicated a higher probability of paying. The decision tree model that we used was also able to identify where creditworthiness indicated a low propensity to pay. And using the segmentation that we were able to create using this decision tree model, we were then able to introduce a new process flow for each of the agencies and help them understand how to improve collections. What we're seeing here is a general highlight of the collections pathway, the preferable processes of different activities over time that we helped the agencies experiment with to understand which actions were going to be most effective in the collections process based on the different segments that we were able to create in the cyber financial system. So the high propensity debt had a very different process flow to the specialist debt or the low propensity debt. What did this additional data, additional visibility, and additional segmentation do to the collections? Essentially, over the first 9 months, we saw a 4% improvement in collections over the whole portfolio. Now, this is a very large portfolio in the hundreds of millions of dollars, so a 4% improvement is a significant amount. It just goes to show that when you dive into the data, when you have visibility of what's happening in your portfolio, and you try to understand that and then respond to it, and then you have the controls to respond using the cyber financial system, you're able to improve your collections with relative ease. So just going on to some of the other activities we introduced to the process flow of the debt when we introduced cyber, which added more control. One of the more effective changes we made was adjustments to the agencies that were working the debt and how they were working the debt. Essentially here we just have a basic summary of 3 different segments, high-level segments. For an example, we had agency A, who currently had 50% of the collection portfolio across the board. We broke them down by segment, and in cyber financial we were able to identify that agency A was actually very poor in collecting on debt with no additional financial information from Equifax. Agency A, on the other hand, in the low score period, in the low score segment, was a lot more effective than their peers in collecting debt. And then in the high score segment, all 3 agencies were effectively on par. They were the same in performance. The response to this is pretty straightforward. We added a significant additional allocation of the low score segment of debt to agency A's portfolio. We reduced their allocation on the no score debt, and we increased the allocation to the other 2 agencies. This may seem relatively simplistic, but what really is highlighted here is the ease at which we made this change using the financial system, the cyber financial system. Another particularly effective change we made that we couldn't have done without the decisioning system of cyber financial was one to do with how we moved the debt from agency 1 to agency 2 and then from agency 2 to agency 3, what I would call recycling of the debt. Now this one, we observed an interesting distinction in how the debt that was paying or had a high probability of paying performed when it was moved from agency 1 to agency 2. Our client had essentially a rule in their decisioning system that stated that at 90 days after placement, all the debt had to move to the next agency. The observed effect here was that those accounts, approximately $3.88 million worth of collections on a 6-month basis, were less likely to pay when they were moved from agency 1 to agency 2. How did we effectively fix for this, and what benefit did we see when we changed? We altered the decision network in cyber financial with relative ease to add some additional decisioning. That decisioning was to identify where a customer is paying or has a high probability of paying in the next 2 weeks. And if that's the case, we kept the account with the existing agency. We did not move it to the next agency, regardless of it expiring past the 90-day period or other defined recycling rules. What was the effect of this? Again, it's something that's hard to see but easy to fix for, and the effect was far greater than we even expected. We brought forward $3.88 million of collections over a 6-month period. We paid a lower commission on that $3.8 million, and then we added another $3 million on top of that in collections that we had previously been losing, simply because customers who had a propensity of paying were less likely to pay when an agency changed, when they had a relationship with an existing agency and that moved from someone they knew, an agency they knew, a service provider that they had been leveraging, to a new agency. Another piece of insight that we found very effective was in terms of diving into the age bracket differences when we identified a change in performance over a particular period. What happened here was we identified in the March month, on an annual basis, there was a spike in performance, in liquidation, and we couldn't explain it using the visualization capability that we had at hand. We looked at debt quality, that wasn't changing. We looked at debt balance, that wasn't changing. We looked at the average scores, they weren't changing. So we dove a little deeper using the Tableau tool. We identified that when we broke it out by age bracket, there was a significant difference in the performance of the age groups in the March month versus the surrounding months. And particularly highlighted here is the under 25 age bracket, which increased in performance by over 20% in March. Now, diving into this, we identified that the under 25s were getting a much larger tax return in March, as simple as that. And we were able to then adjust very quickly to add a new campaign to our decisioning system. And that campaign sent out effectively targeted attempts to contact people and encourage them to use the refunds they got from tax to pay off debt instead of buying a plasma television. What we also did during that period was we reassigned and reallocated resources to focus on the under 25s instead of focusing on those age brackets that were less likely to pay during that period. Again, it was just the ease of control that we had with the cyber financial system that let us make significant changes very quickly and add value to the client's portfolio. And just in the interest of time, I will skip over this one, but I'm sure the deck will be distributed at a later date. So what have we seen so far? We've seen an introduction of a capable platform, cyber financial platform. We've seen the ability of it to add interesting visualizations that give insights into a debt portfolio. We've seen how you can take those insights that you've garnered and adjust very quickly to respond to them to change how your portfolio performs as a result. And what you get is a significant increase in collections. If we just have a look at what happened to Bell Canada over a 12-month period, just implementing the cyber financial system by having an improved decision network, by adding additional campaigns and pathways that we're able to build from our insights into the portfolio, we increased collections by 11%, and that was an increase from an annual collection of $90 million to an annual collection of just over $100 million. So it's nothing to shy away from. It's certainly an impressive improvement, and it's not the only business we've seen this improvement with. Bell Canada is the largest telecommunications company in Canada, and we also saw the same effects with the largest telecommunications company in Australia. I've only had time to go through one case study today, and a very small number of the many things we did on this portfolio, but I hope it gives you a good picture of how adding the cyber financial system to a client's portfolio and then leveraging the insights you get from that system and the control you have to improve your portfolio will add value very quickly and in a significant amount. Again, in interest of time, I will leave it there. I'll stop and let my colleague step in. But just before I do that, I'll just stop for any questions, actually. No, I've just thought questions might be difficult if they're not in English. Apologies. If anyone has a question in English? No, that was a big ask. So I'll stop here, and that gives my colleague significant time to go through the more complex analytics side of the Equifax collections world. Thank you.